All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to P&C Federation's first virtual town hall event. Tonight, we'll be trying to attempt to take an in-depth look at community leadership and actually what this means and what does it look like in the future. But before we start, can I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet this evening across New South Wales, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off tonight. We are recording this event and it will be available for download on the P&C Federation website in a few days' time, I presume. So you'll be able to review and share it with others if you so wish. We do encourage you to keep your video on, as this is a town hall event. We're trying to encourage people to be able to visibly see everybody else. If you're on a computer or a laptop, at the top right of your screen, there is actually a gallery view button if you're not familiar with Zoom already after 2020, which will allow you to see many more people on the screen simultaneously. There's a chat function at the bottom of the window, which you can turn on. We encourage you to do this if you have questions or if you wish to add a comment. Please, by all means, add your comments and we'll do our best to try and address them during the evening. And if you want to, jump right on now and introduce yourself to the others in the room. Basically, we'll keep everyone muted unless during the evening we identify you as a person we'd like to call on to speak, in which case one of the administrators behind the scenes will actually unmute you. And we encourage you to use your full names if you haven't already logged in with your full names. This just makes it easier for us to find out where you're from. If you want to put on where you're actually from as part of that, that would be great as well. If you have any technical issues, do a private chat message at the bottom to the tech support person. I hope it's sitting in the background ready to address that issue. And it's very unlikely we'll probably get through the evening addressing everyone's questions. If we can't address them during the night, we will try to have them answered post-event by email. So if you can not satisfied with not getting addressed during the evening, we will try our very best to try and get that answered for you post-event. So that's the housekeeping. So I'd like to welcome our three guest speakers for the evening. So we have, and if we can have them just wave their hand as I go through the list. Gemma Reigate is the CEO for the Centre for Volunteering in New South Wales, who has extensive experience across the state and federally, I do believe, in terms of volunteering in Australia. We have Ingrid Waite, who's waving right there, past president and vice president at Castle Hill High School. And previous to that, you were involved in your primary, as I remember.
I was, yeah.
And was the 2019 P&C Volunteer of the Year. And Kate Massock, who's the, as I found out this evening, is no longer the president. You're the vice president now, I do believe.
That's right, yes.
Of Arana Heights Public School in Dubbo, and is a practicing solicitor. We won't hold against you this evening, Kate, but Kate's been involved in giving a rural regional perspective in terms of P&C and volunteering for the evening. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Tim Spencer. I'm the president of the P&C Federation of New South Wales, and I'm also the president of my local high school, still about to roll off, fortunately, after many, many years. In terms of community leadership, which is what we're trying to talk about this evening, I've been involved in P&Cs for around about 12 years, which covers a large part of my children's school life, basically. And before I started down this path, I knew our school had a P&C. I had little idea what they did, other than they organised some events around the school. I didn't know how they operated. I didn't know that they actually raised money and ran a number of various things in the canteen and uniform shop at our school. To me, they were really just a mysterious group of parents that met on a regular basis and did things behind the scenes around the school. And at the time, I was really happy not to be involved. until one day I had my arm twisted by a bunch of friends of mine who convinced me to attend my first P&C meeting. I had no idea what to expect at all. I walked in, as I often say to other P&Cs when I'm talking, I walked in as a P&C virgin, had no idea what I was in for. And as fate would have it, I actually walked out of that meeting as P&C president. And I haven't really looked back from that point on. What followed, I think, was a rapid introduction into all sorts of things and meeting protocols, how to run a canteen, an usher band, a uniform shop, all in rapid succession, how to deal with those challenging individuals that all of us from time to time meet along the way. Eventually, my principal twisted my arm to run at the state level when 2014 Federation was put into administration. And since then, I've been involved as a volunteer on Federation as well, in helping rebuild with a bunch of very dedicated staff and other volunteers in rebuilding Federation literally from the ground up. We had to almost start from scratch. There've been a huge number of challenges along the way, and I often sit there and go and become overwhelmed by some of them. And you start to wonder why on earth you've ever put your hand up to volunteer in the first place. You know, I'm just a volunteer. Why am I on earth am I doing this, not spending time with my family? But despite everything that I've done along the way and the challenges I've had, I've always persevered because, from my viewpoint, encouraging and supporting community leadership within schools is absolutely critical to the future of public education. And it helps build that parent involvement and connection in their child's education, which I think is absolutely fundamental. And that's what drives me on a day-to-day basis in doing what I do. 2020 was a year of unprecedented challenge, I think, for all of us, not just at a personal level, but from community leadership point of view and a volunteering point of view, it was really, really challenging. And I'd like to start by asking our three guest speakers this evening what they actually learnt as a result of the fallout of the challenges from last year. Now, I'd like to start with Ingrid, if I could.
Yes, hi Tim. Hello everyone. So yes, what I learnt 2020 last year is, first of all, I learnt a whole lot of new board games, family board games. So that is one of the positives we took out of this. So there's a lot of negatives from 2020, but there was still some positives, that we spent much better time together as a family, much more quality time together as a family. And I also learnt, just, which quite surprised me, I also learnt just how it affected my children mentally as well. They're still quite struggling, really, just from the mental challenges of just having to deal with the not seeing their friends and being isolated. So there is good and bad things, but that's mainly what I've taken away from it.
And your involvement with the school at the school level, how did that impact the high school in terms of their ability to carry out what they normally do?
Obviously, so the canteen obviously had to close. Also, obviously, there's no volunteers obviously allowed, so it severely impacted the school, and obviously the P&C, and then the P&C committee at the time then had to work around the staff being on furlough and all this. So again, I wasn't involved with that, but I can imagine that would be a huge learning curve for them.
Mm-hmm. And Kate, how in rural Australia has it impacted on the things that you've done there?
I took two words away from last year: resilience and connection. I think that the rural community is quite good at proving itself to be resilient a lot of the time, and we really had a big test last year. I know a lot of people that were quite isolated from family, that often live far away, which I think happened to a lot of people around the world. And so, yeah, it really started some great conversations with my own children about connection and other ways that we can stay in contact with family. We learned a whole new load of technological skills. Luckily, my husband is quite good at that kind of thing, but the kids and I learned how to interact with grandparents and other community members that way, so that they could still see friends at times. So, and yeah, resilience, just the ability to bounce back from the constant challenges that were around last year.
You see sort of the community being stronger as a result of all that happened last year?
I think so. Yes, I think there is in some ways a stronger sense of community, and yeah, we all had the struggle in common, which you can certainly feel.
Okay. So Gemma, from your perspective, at a higher level across New South Wales and across other volunteering organisations, what's your takeaway from 2020?
I've got lots of statistics I can share with you a little bit later, but there were some really overwhelming lessons learned from 2020. Firstly, that working from home works and can work. But also in terms of volunteering, there was a lot of real angst about health and safety and allowing volunteers to participate in the way that they had before. And we saw most volunteers stood down across the board in all organisations and groups, local community groups. We had a lot of work to do in supporting organisations to change the way they were doing things and to be open to different modes of volunteering, allowing people to work from home in a way and still do something in terms of their volunteering work. I agree with Kate, there was an overwhelming growth in the sense of the local community, and we saw many people, thousands of people literally come forward at the height of COVID to support their neighbours, their local communities. And that was right across the state, not just in regional and country areas, even in metropolitan areas. It became much more local focused and really showed a desire for connection and supporting other people. So they're just the first observations I'll make.
Yeah, sure. I think it definitely was challenging for so many different reasons last year, but in terms of the fallout from 2020, where would you see this leading in the next few years as volunteer organisations attempt to recover from what's happened?
I think what we know is that the way we do things, the way everyone does things, will have to change if it hasn't already in 2020. We can no longer expect that people will turn up on site at regular intervals and do the same thing that they always have done. As I said, there was a huge number of volunteers stood down in 2020, and we know that organisations and groups are finding it difficult to get their volunteers back on board. So change is necessary if it hasn't already happened, and new ways of doing things and support from all parts of the volunteering ecosystem. So volunteers, volunteering organisations, government, peaks like us, there needs to be support for volunteering to get it back on track and increase that participation right across the board, because it's really important.
I've noticed, well, we've noticed from P&C Federation's point of view and my own practice within our own P&C, once we went to an online or a virtual setting, it attracted new people because there were people who couldn't commit to doing the face-to-face meetings. But at the same time, it's been a bit of give and take. So the people who love the face-to-face don't like the virtual sometimes. Is there any sort of advice you would give in terms of how to navigate that sort of difficult pathway?
I think we're going to have blended ways of delivery and letting people be included and participate. I think we will have to continue to do virtual things. I noticed some of the people who've signed on here, someone is from the far north of New South Wales, right on the Queensland border. I suspect without using technology, those people wouldn't be able to engage in these kind of forums. We know that from our own organisation, and we will continue to do a blended version, sometimes face-to-face for certain things, but others will definitely maintain the virtual presence. There's also a big, I'll say the word push, from government to make sure that there is more of a digital presence, and I guess to future-proof ourselves from hopefully more pandemics in the near future, but any kind of thing like that will happen. And I know from P&Cs, schools, in fact, have the third highest number of volunteers in all sectors, and most of those are obviously P&C volunteers. Many of you probably don't even call yourselves volunteers at times. Sounds like you were voluntold a few times there, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely.
But 1 in 5 volunteers in a school. So you are representing a massive number of people across New South Wales who are a really core part of volunteering, and being able to continue to volunteer and to keep contributing to your school communities and your local communities by giving that time and effort is just a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll come back to you in a minute, Gemma. I just wanted to go to Kate and Ingrid. With the challenges of 2020, we lost a lot of volunteers in schools. There were, myriad reasons people didn't want to come and be exposed to health problems on school site. There was other concerns people had about or being not welcome on school site by the department anyway. How have you guys approached trying to attract people back this year, back into the volunteering fold?
Who talks first?
Either of you, and just jump in.
Well, I'll let Kate speak about this one, because I think you've been more active than me in this.
Okay. What we're doing at the moment, in fact, we've spoken about it at a recent meeting, is to try and interact with the community. With now that there's not so much mingling around the school grounds, or there isn't anymore, we've looked for different ways to reach out to the school community. What we're working on at the moment is a list of survey questions that we're hoping to send out to as many parents as we can, and invite them to fill out a survey as to how they would like us to address any issues at school, how they would like to be involved with the committee, what expertise or experience they can bring, and suggestions as to what they would like us to focus on our resources. So we do all this fundraising, and we want to make sure that it comes from everyone, from the whole community. And we found it really quite challenging to reach out to the community, whereas before I would walk up to people waiting to collect their children and have a chat with them. We've changed. So we're going to try a survey to the community. One other thing that we do is, and our school's been really supportive of this, is when new kindergarten students pick up their enrolment package, we have a P&C form in there introducing ourselves, asking them to provide their contact details so we can add it to a database, and asking them to list in what ways they think they can contribute to the P&C. So can they bake goods if we have a fete? Do they have a business that could donate goods for a raffle? Can they volunteer at the canteen on a Wednesday? So we busily collate that material in the background, and that's how we've tried at the moment to address
Okay.
less face-to-face.
So Gemma, in terms of encouraging volunteers back into the fold after something like a pandemic, do you have some tips and for our members online tonight as to how they would go about doing that?
I noticed in the comments there were some suggestions from people around recruitment of volunteers. We believe that what we call volunteer management is the critical element of recruiting and retaining volunteers. And so that sounds a little bit bureaucratic, but it's about having the structures, the policies and procedures. They're very important. People knowing what is expected of them and what they're getting themselves in for, or what they've been tapped on the shoulder for. So having clear structures, clear goals for the group, the policies and procedures that are necessary, comfort around any dispelling any of those fears that people might have coming back into face-to-face situations if you choose to do it that way. We are advocating that particularly organisations like P&Cs, if the technology is available to do that blended approach and to give people the opportunity to choose between face-to-face and virtual engagement. And I mean, there are many other resources that we provide, which are on our website if you're interested. I won't go through them all now, but lots of tips around re-engaging and getting people back to volunteering.
Yes, I know it's been a massive challenge, even in my own personal context at the high school. We lost all our volunteers, laid off or put off our casual staff in the canteen, and to re-engage, we could only get the paid people back. Our volunteers were very reluctant to step on to the premises, and still are to some extent, because they are uncertain about the protections that are being put in place to help them health-wise.
Exactly. The research that we have done so far indicates that a vast majority of volunteers are not confident to return to face-to-face volunteering. And so all we can do is to try to build that confidence that it is safe and make sure that it is safe. We really have to do that.
Absolutely. So in terms of the current, beyond the COVID context, the challenges in terms of volunteering overall recently, the successes that people have had in this, and the future trends in volunteering. And that's a pretty big scope to answer in one hit. But if you could sort of talk to where you see the future of going, and what sort of challenges P&C might face and have to change to cope with that.
Yeah, I think there is a body of evidence that suggests that formal volunteering, which is what you are all doing, is declining. It has declined over the last 10 years, right across the board. It's not just with P&Cs. And I think someone in the comments made the very valid fact that people are time poor, and so it is more difficult to commit to a body of time to participate. But on the bright side, informal volunteering is growing, and it has grown exponentially. There are, in the last General Social Survey, there were almost 7 million people informally volunteering, and the formal volunteering had dropped down to about 5.8 million people across Australia, that is. So I think if we can all of us devise ways that people can contribute in a more informal way, not as really not having such great expectations for people to participate in that really long-term way. More episodic type of volunteering, then we will definitely see more people participate. The other thing is, we, as a nation, we really can't afford to lose volunteers. The statistic that we use for the contribution of volunteers per annum to the economy is $290 billion worth of effort. And if you all just calculated the effort that you contribute to your schools in your local communities, that really adds up to, and we're not only talking about money, we're talking about social capital, etc. So it's an investment that you are all making in not just your local communities, but the whole of the state and the nation, that we can't afford to let just drop. So we've all got to do our very best to keep volunteering going.
Yep. No, I completely agree. I think we have seen, even in the P&C world, a drop in the formal volunteering over time. And it is important to keep your volunteer base wide, and you have to be flexible about the way you do it. So I think that's really good to know, and to hear that other sectors of volunteering are doing that as well. And it's something I think we, as Federation, will have to look into, helping our members work out how best we can support them in doing that without so much of a formal structure around it. I think that is also a slight impediment, because I think while formal volunteering has dropped off, compliance and government legislation has increased as well. So it makes it a double-edged sword, if you like, to attract people into the roles. So informal is definitely, I think, a positive step forward for all of us, to encourage those people to do the sporadic volunteering. And if we can actually go out and make sure that you're involving the whole school community, not just that core of people that sits at the centre of the entire event. As we're all well aware, there's usually 5 or 6 people at the P&C that do a vast majority of the hard work, and they spend a lot of their time grafting other people in from around the school to try and help out on specific events. So I might, with that, segue to Ingrid, and I'd like to find out from her what her experiences were as a P&C office bearer for many years, and what experiences you learnt and took away from that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I became involved in the P&C Associations in 2008 when I moved to Australia. I had 4 small boys, and I had absolutely no idea how the Australian education system worked. I'd never even knew what a mufti day was. I hadn't even heard of a mufti day. So like many parents, I started down the volunteering pathway by working in the canteen at Cherrybrook Public School, which I found to be an invaluable source of information that people assumed that I should know, but I didn't. And then I started attending the monthly meetings again to have a better understanding of the system. And then when I left in 2011, I was the P&C secretary, which, by the way, I think is one of the hardest roles of the executive. From there, I moved to Samuel Gilbert, again, as president and vice president over the years, working in the canteen and the uniform shop. But also I was on the committee for the organisation of our Great Fete, for our annual Great Fete, which raised over $100,000 a year for the school. So it was a huge undertaking. So from that, then I moved to Castle Hill High School in 2014. And again, I was immediately involved in the P&C. And then in 2015, I became president. Now, I found the role of the high school president P&C far easier to begin with, as there was no fete to organise, there was no fundraising, there was no social events. So we obtained all our profits from running the uniform shop and the canteen, from the annual P&C contributions, and then from the building funds when needed. So initially I thought I was onto an easy gig, but the school and the P&C needed to modernise to keep up with the demands of the community. So this involved a lot of extra work. So I ended up bringing online ordering first to the canteen and the uniform shop, which is so quick and easy to say, but took an awful lot of work and research. Our canteen was old and tired. It needed a rehaul. We moved our systems from QuickBooks to Receipt Bank. Now at this stage, we had a paid canteen manager, a paid uniform shop manager, and about 8 paid canteen assistants. So again, we had to give our policies and procedures a complete rehaul to ensure that we were compliant in all aspects of essentially being a small business employer. Again, this involved an awful lot of work and research. So my years at Castle Hill were not the easy gig that I thought they were going to be. But I learned so many different skills from doing those roles. So that's my experiences so far at the P&C.
So in terms of your experience, what would be one thing that would have made your life easier if you'd known it up front?
Definitely, I think if it'd been some more time management, like say being time poor. So, you know, what I needed was probably about 26 hours in a day to get everything done, because obviously I still had the family and that to look after as well. But I think just learning about time management, and initially when I first started in the P&C, the association, we didn't have the support there, which obviously it's turned around 180 degrees, so it's full support there. So I think initially in the early days that was tough, because we were pretty much doing it on our own and just you know, trying to do the best we could at the time without having that general referral body. So that's been a huge improvement.
Okay, so we've got a couple of questions that are coming in on the chat. Unfortunately, I've just had a little bit of a technical issue behind the scenes here, and I've just got 1,000 messages in one hit. We do have a question from the floor from Nan, so if I can possibly get her to come up and ask her question.
Hello, I actually didn't have a question. They were asking me to speak about something. I don't know.
Okay.
About my experience or something.
Okay, well, if you've got a comment you want to throw in, by all means, while you're on.
Oh, okay. Well, we just had our AGM yesterday, the first virtual, like the hybrid AGM. So we had live, where we had up to 30 parents could attend on site. And then we have however many that they want to come on Zoom. Unfortunately, I couldn't count how many actually showed up on Zoom, because I was busy trying to do the management of the actual like Zoom part, and also chairing the meeting. But yeah, there was a bit of technical difficulty, but I think it was successful. And what we've currently done, we've been brainstorming how to get all the volunteers together. We're using a whole lot of Facebook, and like I've been posting things on Facebook in our school P&C Facebook website, and as well using the WhatsApp chat groups, so that we can get parents from each year group. They each have a chat group. We've got one that's for the exec team. We've got one for the events management team, and we've got one for Parents for Change team. The one that's Parents for Change, they're just basically discussing issues that arise at the school and how they can fix it in a positive way. The events team, they're the ones with the problem, because they can't really go on site, because on site you can only have 30 indoors and 50 outdoors. So they have to now brainstorm what they're going to do, like what events they want to do, how they're going to do it, how they're going to support the school. Maybe not necessarily fundraising, but at least make it a social event and try and get the community spirit and build up the spirit. And the way we're doing it at the moment is just to get key members in, get them to get their friends in by word of mouth, or texting, or whatever they want, like parents in the parent community, and then going from there. So I'm asking everybody at the moment through the chat groups and emails and text messages to start thinking about what you want to do, how you want to do it, because it's a team effort. So, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're still brainstorming.
Thanks, Nan. We have a question from Sarah as well about engaging parents from different and diverse backgrounds at school. So if we can get Sarah on.
Thanks, Tim. Yes, I am on the P&C for Croydon Public School, and we are considering establishing a subcommittee of the P&C to focus on diversity and inclusion. And I'm just interested to know if that has been experience of any other P&C, and if not, through a formal subcommittee, if there are other thoughts about how to reach out to engage the diverse families within our community. We have a very vibrant cultural diversity in our school community, and also lots of parents with kids with additional needs, including myself. So yeah, just how to reach people.
Okay, I might throw that at Gemma, if you've got any words of wisdom in terms of engaging diverse communities.
A lot of your answers are already in the chat there. Using all of the means of social media, and it really depends on the community, obviously, but word of mouth is still a very great way to engage people. Social media, obviously, and the different channels for different people, it suits different people. And the school itself actually should have some really good engagement tools that separate from the P&C, which would be great if you could utilise those. So,
okay.
I think at our canteen, so our paid assistants, we have from multiple nationalities, and they speak a range of different languages. So I think it's important that when asking for volunteers, just to put it out there that the assistants you're working with, that you'll be with all the time, these are the languages that they speak. So maybe those people that don't have English as a first language will be more comfortable knowing that there's somebody there that they can communicate with. So just putting it out there that the people that be working with, these are the languages that that they speak. So again, that, like I say, it'll just make them, hopefully feel more confident to come forward to volunteer.
Anything to add, Kate?
Unmute. Whoops, sorry, I was muted myself. I like what Ingrid just said, that's a really good idea and makes it really approachable. We haven't specifically thought about that issue, but I can see that it's a really important one and something that we should really turn our minds to engaging with the whole community.
It is a difficult challenge, I think, from, we were the largest high school in the state up until Castle Hill High School took over this year. Thanks, Ingrid. We have 37 or 39 nationalities at the high school, so it's really difficult to engage all of them simultaneously. But we found that one of the better ways was to find a champion out of the majority, the larger groups that could cross those cultural boundaries, understood what the P&C was up for and how it worked, and they could translate that into understandable for their specific culture. And we have about 4 or 5 of them at the school, and they are absolutely magnificent people who drive others to volunteer in a way that we couldn't do because we don't understand fully the cultural background and the motivations of the diverse culture that we have at the school. So if you do get an opportunity, that's one of my recommendations. If you've got a champion at the school, by all means encourage them to participate and to bring others in, and you'll find that by and large that works really, really well. A couple of other questions before we move on a little bit further. We've got one from Cheryl Davey, who's dealing with the recruitment issue specifically. I know we've talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's obviously becoming more and more of a challenge across the board, specifically when you're a volunteer and having to deal with paid employees as well, as many P&Cs do. So if we could get Cheryl on just for a second and we can have a quick chat about her question.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for inviting me to the table. It's more to the point, I find we do have a non-formal group of people on our P&C, and we do have a formal volunteering group. It is a core group, and there is a time frame for us to be on it. And I'm actually a recycled P&C president from 25 years ago. So when my first children were there, and now I'm back in the fray, go figure. So it is so difficult because people, the feedback we've got is people don't want to be allocated a role. They don't want to come to a P&C meeting and feel they're suddenly president or feel they're suddenly dumped with something they didn't want to. They want to be a part of the P&C but don't want to step into the unknown. So we have tried flyers, we have tried engagement, we do have Facebook, we do have quite a variety. We do have word of mouth, but when it starts to involve contracts, canteens, stock take spreadsheets, zero insurances, work cover, etc., I think some people get a bit frightened to take on those. They don't have to take on those roles. So I've tried to encourage this year to be the year of succession planning, so we can transfer knowledge to everyone so they can gain a better understanding of how P&C work.
Yeah, I feel your pain, as do many people. I think from the reactions I'm seeing on the faces here tonight, everyone, I think, has experienced that in some way, shape or form. Ingrid and Kate, being on the ground, how would you, either of you want to respond to that?
I think that's what we have been trying to do lately is focus on different things that people can bring to the P&C, which is exactly what you were saying before. So if we're having a school fete, are they able to bake something that they can bring along? So that's not a commitment where they have to come every Tuesday night. That might be something that an amount that someone can contribute. Or do they have a business that they run in town and can they donate something to a raffle? Do they have a particular area of expertise that they could help, they know how to run a business, can they help with that? So we just try and I think of it as divide and conquer, a small way that people can put something in so that it doesn't seem such a big task. For those of us that sit around the table, we have our meetings on Tuesday, but each Tuesday evening, and a way to bring the community a bit more together and involved.
Yep. Ingrid, any words of wisdom?
It was in a slightly different situation because, again, in the high school, we don't have those events. Our P&C meetings are more for sort of information. So once the positions are in place, I don't think people feel that pressure to come in because they're going to be landed with the role of doing the chocolate, doing the chocolate drive, whatever. So our P&C meetings are much more about information, sharing what the school's doing, sharing what we at P&C are doing, because I think it's important to be very, very transparent so that the parents know exactly, where the money's going and what we're doing as a P&C. And I think in that way, I think it's great we can have these blended meetings, because I've noticed on some of the comments people are saying that the turnouts have gone from meetings from, I don't know, maybe 10 people in the room to like 100 people attending on the Zoom call. So I mean, again, that seems to be a way that we're sort of reaching people, so people feel that they can take part and not feel that pressure into signing up for something. So again, I can see this is going to be sort of the new norm coming the way forward.
One of the things it comes up, we've recently introduced over the last few years the P&C Volunteer of the Year Award, which Ingrid has been a recipient of, in a way of acknowledging the individual contributions of volunteers in P&Cs. We've got a question from the floor from Kim, which is talking about the P&C of the year. And if we can get Kim up to talk about that.
Hi, hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks. I'm just staying off camera. In true parent form, I'm surrounded with a lot of mess and a lot of kids. So, so I'll just be a black screen. But something that we've been discussing in our meetings is every year the Volunteer of the Year Award comes up, and we just don't feel comfortable nominating a single person. We're a team, and only a team can make this work, really, with people working part-time and caring commitments, which we all have. So I was wondering whether the Federation would consider either adding or changing it to a P&C of the year. And what we've been considering in our team is if it was something like a video nomination or something that you could put together to celebrate. We're all more comfortable celebrating our achievements together, not individually, but that could be, we could use that within our community to promote ourselves. We could share that around. We can all learn from each other. So is that something perhaps that the Federation would consider, because it does truly reflect the teamwork nature of our associations?
The answer, I think, is absolutely. I think we do recognise it is a team effort in a P&C. It has been discussed at Federation level. At the moment, we've got to work out how we deal with it and how we actually put it in a context that will work. I've got Gemma's got a hand up there. Gemma, you've got something to say?
I have. I would really encourage you to nominate your teams for the New South Wales Volunteer of the Year Awards. We have a team award. It's fantastic recognition for the work that you are all doing. And it's also a really great way of getting the message out about what's happening in your communities. So even if the Federation doesn't or does put forward a team award, either way, I would really encourage you to nominate for the New South Wales Volunteer of the Year team and individuals for that matter.
There we go.
Excellent.
But yes, I think Federation is definitely looking at it. Stay tuned. We'll see how that pans out in terms of how we organise that, but it's certainly on our radar. I'll do one more question before I go to Kate, because I want to ask Kate some specific questions in relation to regional P&C and the issues out in non-metro setting. One question that's come up from Lisa Richardson, and it's a perennial one that we deal with all the time at Federation and as P&C office bearers as well. There is the perception, and in fact, it's more than a perception, it's actually a reality in some cases, that there are rules or complexities around running a P&C. Some of them are onerous. Many of them are confusing because you're going across lots of different pieces of legislation. It often turns people off joining as a volunteer into an organisation. So there's this balancing act between meeting your requirements in terms of compliance and being free enough as an organisation to attract people in so that they're not frightened off. So is Lisa able to come online?
Hi, Tim.
Did I sort of capture your question?
Yeah, you did. I think that there's some level of perception around it all being a little bit too hard and too wrapped up in rigmarole, and I feel that sometimes that really puts people off joining P&C organisations. And I wondered, I guess, is there some way, and I've been on P&Cs and I do know that there are a plethora of rules to follow as part of that. Is there a way that we can simplify that to start to take some of that work away from P&Cs to have to follow the rules and the guidelines that are set down by the Federation, and make it a little easier and hopefully attract some people back to participating a little bit more?
Yeah, I think to sort of answer that, it's a multifaceted answer. I think there are pieces of legislation that obviously we can't change. We can try and influence, but they are set by governments, and by and large, all organisations that participate have to meet those minimum requirements regardless. I think from what we do at Federation, we have a set of constitutions which you follow. We are in the current process of reviewing those to try and modernise them to reflect the way organisations work these days or need to work in the future. So we've been taking input from all of you. If you haven't already, I'm sure we're happy to take further input on what you see as the restrictions or the limitations in terms of the constitutional agreement. The caveat on that too is the Constitution is actually set by the minister, not by us. She or he needs to approve that Constitution. So whatever form we put up may actually end up being amended in the end. But by and large, what we're trying to do is simplify everyone's lives by making the Constitution a little bit more flexible, and then providing, if you like, support around that to make sure that there's best practice going on within P&Cs. So probably as far as I can go with that. It's a very complex and deep subject I could talk for hours on, having been involved in this for many years. But I think you're absolutely right. There are a number of people who get turned away by this, and there will always be people who get turned away by having rules and complexities. And it's just the nature of the game. Kate and Ingrid and Gemma, do you have any comments in relation to the complexities of having rules versus flexibility?
I do. If I can jump in first.
Yep.
One of the first things that really jumped out at me when I became involved with the P&C is, wow, we're actually an employer. So this is not talking about constitutions and things, but about responsibilities that the P&C has. And our particular P&C was responsible for people off several different awards. And that was a real concern for me. We were a bunch of volunteer parents and trying to take on this really serious obligation of being an employer. So we reached out to the Federation and worked together with them to come up with an enterprise agreement, which is one quite simple document. It was tried to be kept as plain English as possible, that covers our employment relationship with all of our employees. And that's something that we worked on over a few years, and we'll leave it as a legacy for future P&Cs so that they can come along and they've got this one thing that they can look at and know that that sets out the whole employment relationship.
Mm-hmm. I think you were the first in this ever to do an enterprise agreement from memory.
Yes, we were. Yeah, that was an issue that really hit home for me, and we were very grateful for the support from the Federation to help us develop that, and it's been great.
So if you are a P&C that is an employer, we do have that particular avenue open to you as a P&C. It's just a matter of picking up the phone and talking to Federation, and we'll put you in touch with our legal team who actually deals with that. They have a way of explaining the pros and cons and the ins and outs of the EA to you. And at the moment, we're getting fast-tracked with EAs. I think that's right, Hannah, isn't it? It's a turnaround of 6 to 8 weeks, I think, from start to finish, which is a pretty amazing process. And you end up with essentially one document that covers all your different employees, should you employ that. There are restrictions, obviously. If you have one employee, an EA doesn't apply. If you have no employees, there's no point in having one at all. But if you have multiple employees across multiple awards, it is worth giving it a serious piece of consideration. And that's something we've actually put through for our members recently, with all the complexity in the employment space, especially over casual versus part-time. It's a complex area indeed. Does Ingrid, you have a comment on that at all? In terms of the complexities,
I think
the scariness of complexity.
Yes. I think Kate has got it right by the fact that saying that you need to sort of future-proof your P&Cs. Sort of gone are the days where you can just sort of you want somebody to employ in the canteen, so you used to just tap somebody on the shoulder and say, do you want this job? Gone are those days. You have to realise that the P&C is a business. We do employ people, and we need to be consistent. So yes, I think it can be complex, but it's just initial complex. So once you've got that system in place, and that's what's going to take the work, but once you've got that system in place, you're making it incredibly easy for future executives to take on that role, because the system is all in place and it's set and done. So I think that's the benefit. So yes, it will be complex initially, but that's the reason you're doing it, to future-proof for previous execs, to have that consistency, and obviously to, you know, fall in line with all the things that we need to fall in line with. So which is the one thing that we worked on at P&C Castle Hill, you know, for a number of years, but now we've got the system in place. So every time we need to employ somebody or follow the rules, we know exactly what steps we need to take. Yeah.
So Gemma, in terms of what you've experienced with other volunteering bases, the perennial challenge of dealing with rules and legislation versus encouraging volunteers to stay or even jump on board. What's sort of your take on this?
I think the rules are really important, without wanting to you know, have too much red tape, particularly to make sure that the P&C itself is well looked after. So, for example, rules around insurance and liability and so forth, I think they are critical. And the more you know about that and are transparent about what's in place, then people are more likely to feel secure about volunteering in those particular roles. So I think the enterprise agreements, the insurance, the liability situation, really critical to have all of that in place, so that you can all sign up for doing things with that element of security, that you know everything is covered.
No, that's all good advice, I think. I think I want to go to Kate now, because I haven't had a chance for you to express sort of your views on your exposure with P&Cs, and particularly in the rural context. I know there's challenges already in the education space for rural remote education. And obviously there's a different context in a rural setting than there is in a metro setting for a P&C. So what's sort of been your experience in terms of P&C in a rural context?
So personally, I am part of the P&C in a quite a large regional area, which is Dubbo. And I've even found from talking to P&Cs in even smaller communities that there's quite a different approach. For example, we have a lot of trouble engaging people to be involved with our P&C. I think that's not just specific to rural, but I think one thing that I noticed from speaking with someone who comes from a really quite small rural P&C is that the P&C is treated as an absolute community. There are 50 members of the P&C, and that's pretty much the whole community of a really small school. Here in Dubbo, we don't get so much of that community engagement, but we also, at the same time, we're dealing with isolation from larger areas and a bit of support that possibly metro P&Cs would have from other places. So I think the two things that we struggle with are isolation and access to various resources. It's not always easy for us to get expert speakers to come and talk to us about different things, although in the current space that we are now, where things have gone virtual, we've definitely seen some improvement now in terms of access and closing the gap there. So I think we do have a lot of issues in common with Metro, but we find it that the community is there and want to be involved, but still engaging them and getting them involved is quite a challenge for us. And the isolation. Yeah. Yep.
So what do you actually see as the main value that your P&C contributes to your school community?
I see the main value is providing a voice for parents and community members to be heard in the education of our children. And the way I see our role is working with the school to provide the best possible opportunities for the kids at our school. So I think the value from the P&C comes in fundraising to add additional resources that the parents and the community see are quite fundamental, and also having a voice and being heard in what we regard as important in the education of our children and what's happening with the school, and just an understanding of what's going on at the school.
Okay. So what I might do, we've reached 8 o'clock now, which is sort of the end of where we plan to be. So I might start to wind up with a question to all three of you in what you see as the future of P&C associations. So I might start with you, Kate.
Okay. I think the future of P&Cs is to be a connection between home life and school, to show our kids that we value their education and are willing to support it. And the way of doing that is through the P&C. So that could be through through resources that the school needs, through fun activities for the kids and engaging with the school community, or through being heard on decisions being made about their education. So I think to me, it's the link between home life and school.
Ingrid?
So for me, for us personally, so as personally as the Castle Hill P&C, I think our sort of role in the future will be supporting the school to manage the increasing numbers, because as you mentioned, Castle Hill is now over 2,000. So we're going to be supporting the school in that. But in general, I think for P&Cs in the future, I think they need to start engaging more with the social media. So this is, I think, where the direction that P&C is heading in the future. This is a way that we can engage families directly. And I'd also love there to be a greater push to encourage people who don't have English as a first language to feel confident enough to volunteer, because I think that's a huge group of people in that situation that would benefit. So the school would benefit and they would benefit, because I personally know how lonely it can be coming to a new country and not knowing anybody. And for me, the P&C was a godsend. So for me, I'd like to see the P&C be more of a push in that sort of direction.
Okay. And Gemma, your views on where you would see P&C associations in the future?
Along similar lines to Ingrid, actually, I see P&Cs, they're already the link between home, the school and the community. But going forward, I really think that it can grow and be an even stronger link between those three elements of our society, and also be really inclusive and diverse by creating those different spaces for people to participate. So I think the future looks really bright in the moving into your 100th year. I think it's very impressive.
Yes, well, thanks, Jimmy. That actually gives me a fantastic segue to wind this up. Yes, we're actually in our 99th year as Federation. So next year we'll be celebrating 100 years of parent participation in education in a formal sense. And we'll be basically ramping up our engagement with all P&Cs for the next 12 months until we reach hopefully a pinnacle of celebration, I think, next year, Hannah. It does also remind me that we do actually have a current election process underway for the state at P&C Federation. If you want to become a board member or a delegate, by all means, we encourage you to put your hand up, become a member of the board or a delegate, participate in the AGMs. It's an absolutely critical role to have people on the state level and helping drive. All of the people who are currently on there are elected from the rank and file from P&C associations. So every one of us that sits on the board at the present moment have all come from where you are. It gives you a vantage point that you will not get anywhere else, and a real ability to make positive change and to advocate on behalf of parents. So I really will implore anyone that's got any interest at all working on state level to give it a serious piece of thought. And if you are that way inclined, put your hand up in the next elections. I think the nominations open in April, I do believe, Hannah.
That's right. The critical date for us at the moment is the submission of your voting delegates.
Voting delegates.
Yeah.
So as a P&C, you need to be, if you want to be able to vote in the electoral process, you need to actually have a nominee from your P&C as a voting delegate and enroll by March 18th.
By the 10th of March. So
10th of March.
we
10th of
need
March.
to see more of you wanting to vote,
Yep.
and then the nominations will open. So keep an eye out in the e-bulletin.
Yep. So I think, you know, that welcome. I won't say welcome. You've already been here. Thank you all very much for participating in the event tonight. Can I thank our three guest speakers, Kate, Ingrid, and Gemma, very much for their time this evening in participating in this chat. All of those questions that have come through on the chat that we haven't been able to address tonight, we'll see if we can get to them and answer them for you. I know there's been hundreds of them that have just flipped by as I've been trying to navigate the session this evening. But thank you all very much for participating. It's a great pleasure to see so many faces interested in volunteering as a topic. Keep up your volunteering. You are the heart and soul of the school communities in which you engage. And I wish you all the very best in your endeavours in what has been navigating out of a very, very difficult year last year. So thank you and good night, everybody.